Okay, here is the seated overhead hold. On its surface, or by name, you might think that this sounds relatively easy. And it is simple, but it's not always easy. You're going to create the best overhead position you can, starting at your core with your hip flexors engaged. You're going to lift up and overhead. In this position, my shoulder blades are depressed, right? They're back as I pull my arms behind me. And if you look at me from a profile, I'm able to maintain one stacked line without flaring the rib cage, right? So it's almost like I'm tucking my tail a little bit in order to pull back. I can feel that the weight is on my sit bones as opposed to being back on my tailbone. Cool, you can do that? Awesome, no problem, right? Well, let's begin to lower the seat that you're sitting. Now I'm in more hip flexion, right? This angle is smaller. That makes it more difficult for me to do the same move. So I'm gonna try again. Okay, can I keep this? Can I get this overhead? Now it's a little bit tougher, but I can still breathe. I can feel the muscles of my upper back working as well as my hip flexors working. If you get past that, great. Most people can. More realistic starting position would be like on a few inch plate, but the feet, when you go to do this, should be relatively together, maybe an iPhone distance apart. And then again, we're gonna try. Now you're gonna see the difference when we make this a little more difficult. My knees immediately wanna go wide. I'm gonna fight to keep them together. And I'm gonna pull myself up this time, find the ideal position, belly tight, hip flexors on. Can I breathe? Cool, and now I'm fighting to hold this as I lift overhead. Shoulder blades are still depressed. I'm not shrugged, I'm not hunched. I'm pulling back actively with my arms. This is where I would train this movement. If you can do this on the floor, great. You could do it on the floor. That's fine as long as you can hit those points of performance. But I'll show you what happens when I try to train this on the floor. If you look at the low back in particular, when I try to sit up here, it's really hard to extend this. So hard that the move becomes impossible. It becomes not something I want to train. But say you can do that and you're like, great, this is easy for me, no problem. Awesome. Then instead, you're going to sit on the floor if that's easy for you. You're also going to put your feet up on a surface like this, okay? So now, you're still fighting, but you're fighting in a deeper hip flex position. You're gonna feel your hip flexors. I know this is an overhead move, but that's part of what's gonna stabilize down the chain. And then just check in as you go. Am I taking deep breaths? This is for breaths, not for seconds, because I want you to be aware of how the ribs are moving, how you're breathing when you're in a stressed out position, and can you keep these guys down as you pull back? So upper back and hip flexors are gonna be the main things targeted here. Try it out. It's the seated overhead hold.